Hello there guys, I'm Unstable Voltage and welcome to the final tutorial video for Europa Universalis for Mare Nostrum. In the previous videos I have covered most of the fundamental changes in the Mare Nostrum DLC. This final video is going to be me going over some of the minor points that I missed on the previous videos, and also just a couple of sort of miscellaneous changes that I feel are relevant to the game. So the first thing that I want to demonstrate, and I did talk about it briefly in the first video when I mentioned the changes to navies, is the ability to actually raid coasts. Now this is something that is limited to the Berbers, so basically most of the Sunni nations in Northern Africa. If we go and look at our ideas, it says here, you can see that little ball and chain. Our Berber traditions gives us may raid coasts. So anyone with Berber ideas has this ability. So how does that work? Well, first of all, you need a navy. Let's just go ahead and take the 4 lights here, and you need to put them at sea. First of all, let's get them out to the Gulf of Almeria. I'm just going to unpause the game and just put the speed up. Now you can see we've got this little icon here that says we may raid coasts, and it's saying here that we cannot raid the Sunni coasts of Tlemcen, Oja, Iran, Dara, Granada and Almeria. That's because they are Sunni, but we can raid Murcia because we are bordering this sea zone here. That belongs to Castile, it is Catholic. So if we were to press that, as it says, we have 100% effective raiding in Murcia, and the raid would give us 14 ducats and 87 sailors. If we go and click that button, we instantly get the 14 ducats and 87 sailors. Now we can't press that button again now because it's telling us there are no valid targets nearby. Murcia has been raided recently and cannot be raided again until December 1454. So you can only raid the coasts every 10 years. Not only that, it can only be raided once in 10 years, so Tlemcen can't come along and raid them. So each coastal province can only be raided by coastal raiders once every 10 years. If we move this ship over into the next sea zone, in the Straits of Gibraltar, and we now have 100% effective raiding on Cadiz and the Algarve. That will give us 24 ducats, 131 sailors, of which we get instantly, and we can carry on moving up the coast and doing that. So this is a really good way for people playing as the Berber nations to be able to get some gold and to be able to get some additional sailors. Now, sometimes you have to be careful. I'm going over the cap here anyway, but we can carry on working our way up the coast here. Now, what you will find eventually is you will get to a point where you can no longer raid because you are out of range. If you actually look here now, this is too far away from our homelands to raid securely. Now, it's still within supply range, so we're not out of supply range, but we are too far away from our homelands. Now, the people who are getting raided, you don't directly lose gold and sailors. So if I was playing as Castile right now and I was being raided by Morocco, it would tell me that they're gaining gold and sailors, but it doesn't take the gold and sailors from my treasury and my sailor pool. However, when the coasts get raided, it does completely deplete the loot bar. And by depleting the loot bar, it gives you all of those negative modifiers. So local goods produced and the local tax have a minus 25% modifier. Local sailors has a minus 50% modifier. Shipbuilding time and local recruitment time is increased by 30%, and the supply limit is also reduced by 10%. It only takes a couple of years for the loot bar to start coming back, so 2 years after it is looted, it will start to come back at 10% per month. So after 2 years and 10 months, it will be back up to a full loot bar. But remember, it can only be raided every 10 years from the coast. That doesn't mean that it can't be occupied and looted in a war by somebody else. So that is how the coastal raiding mechanic works. While we've got some navies out here, there's a couple of other things that I want to show you. I did mention in a previous video about the detached damage button being renamed to repair damage, and I actually completely could not find where that button was. So I've just taken those ships into an area where they were out of supply range, just so that they would actually get damaged. What you will actually see now is the button for repair damage is actually here now. We're a little bit too far away from our own lands. But the repair damage button is here, and this says all damaged ships will be detached and head for port. And then repaired ships will then return to the unit. Now, as it happens at the moment, we can't really repair damaged ships because all of these are damaged. Or maybe we're just not over the threshold. Let's just go back out and take a little bit more attrition over there. We'll go into another month. We can move over here, the Bay of Biscay. Just trying to get some damage on these ships. Let's move back out over here. Yep, so it doesn't really have anything to do with the threshold, but the entire navy is damaged, so we can't really split off the damaged ships because we'd be splitting off the entire navy. But while I've got the navy out here, it allows me to show you one other thing, and that is the changes to admirals. This is something I forgot to mention in the first video. So normally when you have an admiral, and we can get an admiral over here on this fleet, let's go ahead and get ourselves an admiral. There he is. Our admiral is on this fleet. Now, it used to be that you could only assign admirals to a fleet if they were in port. That is now no longer the case. You can actually teleport admirals as long as the ship is in supply range, or the fleet is in supply range. You can teleport admirals around, much like you can with generals and have been able to do since the base game. You can now do that with admirals. So let's just get some of these ships together. If I was to just merge this whole fleet, this makes this a little bit easier to demonstrate, because then we will have a mix of damaged ships and repaired ships. So let's just get all of these ships together, and we'll group them up. So now you can see we have a fleet that has fully repaired ships and damaged ships. The 4 lights are the damaged ones. If I click this repair damaged ship buttons, the 4 lights will break off. They will go and dock up. When they've repaired, they will come and rejoin this fleet wherever it is. So that is a nice little addition to that. So one other thing that I should mention as well is mercantilism. It is now possible to buy up your mercantilism. Not something you could ever do before. There are lots of events in the game that would give you the option to take increased mercantilism, which is normally the one that you'd want to take, but they've now actually added the option. If you go to the trade tab, you've got this promote mercantilism button, which costs you 100 diplomatic power, and you can increase your mercantilism. I can also now confirm that increasing your mercantilism no longer affects corruption. This is something that I was a little bit unsure about at the time when I was making the video on corruption, and that's because originally Paradox had said that high mercantilism would increase corruption, but they decided to do away with that mechanic because mercantilism is such a useful thing, and you already have to pay Diplo points to promote the mercantilism anyway. So if you've got spare Diplo points, you can use it to bump your mercantilism up, and it is not going to affect your corruption. So another feature that I'd like to show you guys is something called Unconditional Surrender. I'm just going to go and declare a war over here on Castile. I don't have a CB against them, but that is fine. It will allow me to do what I want to. Now, I can't do anything at the moment because we haven't been at war for long enough. I do have to wait until we can bring back our diplomat. So let's just allow that to happen. You'll also notice where Castile is blockading coast, well, where we are blockading Castile's coast. You can see the little sort of the red triangles. Obviously, we're just sinking a Portuguese fleet here. So once that fleet has moved away, you can see that sort of line indicating that the coast there is being sieged as we're getting sunk by the might of the Portuguese navy. However, we now have 2 buttons. We have Sue for Peace, which works just the same way that it used to, and we also have Unconditional Surrender. Also be very careful if you are trying to negotiate a peace deal via clicking on the War Shield down here at the bottom, because you've got these 2 buttons again. The one on the right with the olive branch is the negotiating peace, whereas the one on the left with the white flag is the unconditional surrender. Now you can see this says unconditionally surrender to them, giving them 2 months to send us a peace offer. So how does that work and what does it do? Well, let's just go and get out of this little naval engagement here, just so I can show this a little more easily. Obviously the changes to the way that navies work makes it a little bit difficult to surrender with all of your ships intact. But we are losing morale and we should be able to get out of there. So you can see the navy's morale goes down to 0 now, which it never used to do before. So what will happen if I unconditionally surrender? Well, let me just show you. If we go in and unconditionally surrender, it actually tells you It will give Castile 2 months to send us a peace offer, which will automatically be accepted. If they do not send one, they will be increasingly severe calls for peace in their country. Our armies that are in our home provinces will be exiled and thus protected once we do this. Control of all provinces currently owned and controlled by us will be transferred to the enemy. If I click that button, you will now see that every single province we own is transferred to Castile. Castile now have a 100% war score, and our own armies are not actually showing at the moment because I haven't unpaused the game, but the moment I unpause the game, Castile will probably accept the peace. And your own armies get black flagged, which means that they can't be engaged by the enemy. Now, there is a purpose for doing this. Sometimes you get involved in a war that you just don't want to fight. And you've all seen how these wars go on sometimes. The AI will wipe out your army and then spend the next several years sieging all of your lands very slowly, looting all of your provinces, and it drives up your war exhaustion. Your provinces get looted, you lose money. When the war's eventually over, all of your provinces have been looted. You've got no army, you've got to rebuild your army from scratch, and it can take quite a long time to get back on your feet again, especially if you are being threatened by another nation who might take advantage of the fact that you have no army. And possibly very high war exhaustion. So the idea of this unconditional surrender is if you want to get out of a war quickly, you can offer a 100% peace deal to your enemy, but it protects your army. Your army get black flagged, so he cannot go and kill off your troops. He has 2 months to accept the peace deal. If he doesn't accept the peace deal, he will get a call for peace, and they gain war exhaustion at double the usual rate. So obviously this works in multiplayer as well. You can unconditionally surrender. Now, at the moment, the AI will never offer to unconditionally surrender. Paradox may add that at some point in the future, but at the moment the AI does not do it. However, the AI will always accept an unconditional surrender. They may not do it instantly. As you can see, my army has been black flagged. And there we go. There is the unconditional surrender. They've done that there. They took a province for Portugal. So as you can see, sometimes they don't actually take all that much. But that means we got out of that war. We got out of that war and we managed to keep our army. So if we were being attacked by Tlemcen, at least we've got our army to defend ourselves. So that is the point of unconditional surrender. It's probably not something that you're going to use very often, but it does indeed have its uses. One other final thing that I'd like to mention, which is a little bit of a random thing, but I did think it was actually quite an important change. If you are playing as a primitive, which is most likely means you will be playing as one of the Native American tribes, or anyone who is a primitive tech group, previously the only way to westernize, the same as everybody else, was if you had a western neighbour. So if one of your provinces bordered that of someone who was westernized, you could then westernize yourself and reform your religion. You no longer have to do that with primitives. All of the other tech groups still have to westernize in the same way, but the primitive tech group can now reform their government or their religion if they have a total of 18 techs in all categories. So for example, if we just go and look, I mean, we're not primitive here playing as Morocco, but if we go and look at our techs, you can see we're on tech 3, 3 and 3, which gives us a total of 9. So if we were on 6, 6 and 6, that would give us a total of 18. It doesn't have to be 6, 6 and 6, it could be 7, 5 and 6 or any other combination. As long as the total comes to 18, then as a primitive you can reform your government type or your religion. It must be noted, however, that reforming your government type in that way doesn't give you the free technology boost that you would normally get from westernization. But it does mean that the Native Americans and any other primitives that are on the map can actually become westernized without having to wait for a western neighbour to settle next to them, or without having to go and settle next to a western neighbour themselves. So I do like that little change, and I think that might make it a little bit more viable playing as some of the Native American tribes, because very often by the time you've been able to westernize, it means that someone like France or England or Spain or Portugal have already got a foothold in the American continents, and they usually rip the Native Americans apart. But there we go, that is all I have to offer on Mare Nostrum. Personally, overall, I think a lot of the changes in the game are quite interesting. I've recently started playing my first full campaign with the Mare Nostrum expansion, and I haven't really played enough yet to know exactly how all of these changes are going to play out in the long run, and whether or not I prefer them over the sort of original mechanics that would have been in version 1.15, but I'm sure I will let you guys know. So thanks a lot for watching. I hope you found this video series useful, and until next time, goodbye for now.